A massive chamber filled with Cairn delegates stood in absolute silence. The High Council Hall, a place where words had always been the strongest weapon, had never witnessed a moment like this. The Cairn were the most peaceful species in the galaxy, known for their diplomacy, medicine, and refusal to engage in any kind of war. For thousands of years, they had remained neutral in all conflicts, believing that violence only led to more suffering. And yet, today, the unthinkable was happening. Eldrin Var, one of the most respected elders of the Cairn, stood at the center of the council chamber, his hands resting on the glowing podium before him. His voice, calm but firm, echoed across the hall. "We have watched this war unfold from the safety of our world," he said. "We have seen the Galactic Dominion crush weaker civilizations, enslave entire species, and destroy planets in their thirst for power. And now, they seek to do the same to humanity." Murmurs spread across the chamber. The Cairn had always avoided choosing sides. It was their belief that peace was the only way forward, and interfering in wars was against their core philosophy. But Eldrin Var was not finished. "Many of you believe that war is never the answer," he continued. "That our path is to remain neutral, to offer aid to the wounded, to be the voice of reason. But tell me this, when the Dominion burns human colonies to ash, when they enslave those who cannot fight back, where is reason then?" A hush fell over the hall. The Cairn had seen the reports. They had all witnessed the destruction of Terran 5, a human colony that had refused to surrender to the Dominion. Every man, woman, and child had been slaughtered. The Dominion called it an example. The Cairn called it a massacre. Eldrin pressed a button on the podium, and a large holographic screen appeared in the middle of the chamber. The screen flickered and displayed footage from human battles, soldiers fighting against overwhelming Dominion forces, civilians being rescued from burning buildings, and starships making desperate last stands to protect the weak. And then something even more shocking played, a clip of human soldiers, heavily wounded, still refusing to leave their allies behind. Some of those allies weren't even human. A small Cairn girl, crying and lost in the ruins of a destroyed city, was lifted into the arms of a human soldier. He shielded her with his own body as plasma fire rained down from the skies. The Cairn delegates watched in stunned silence. "These are the ones we call violent?" Eldrin asked, his voice heavy with emotion. "These are the ones we claim to be dangerous. If war is all they knew, they would have left that child behind. If war was their purpose, they would not fight so hard to protect those who cannot fight for themselves." A younger delegate, Tivarshen, stood abruptly. "But what can we do? We are not warriors. The Dominion would destroy us if we took a side." Eldrin nodded slowly. "Yes, we are not warriors. But does that mean we must remain silent? Does that mean we let another species fall while we hide behind our philosophy of peace? Maybe, just maybe, peace is not the absence of war. Maybe peace is the courage to stand against injustice." The chamber erupted in a mix of voices, some in support, others in outrage. The Cairn had never dared to think this way before. The High Chancellor, Varric Mal, raised his hand, signaling for silence. His expression was unreadable as he studied Eldrin. "You propose that we abandon our ways," Varric said. "You ask us to break thousands of years of tradition. And for what? A war that does not involve us." Eldrin looked directly at the Chancellor. "A war that involves all of us. If the Dominion is allowed to destroy humanity, who do you think they will come for next? Do you believe our neutrality will save us forever?" Varric was silent. The delegates exchanged uncertain glances. Deep down, they all knew the answer. The Dominion did not care for peace. It only cared for power. Then an elder delegate, one who had been silent until now, stepped forward. Miraval, one of the oldest and most respected Cairn, spoke in a soft but clear voice. "I have lived through many cycles of peace, but I have also seen what happens when evil is allowed to grow unchecked." She turned to Varric. "Perhaps Eldrin Var is right. Perhaps this war is no longer about humans and the Dominion. Perhaps it is about something much bigger. Another murmur spread through the chamber. Eldrin took a deep breath and spoke his final words. "I do not ask you all to take up weapons," he said, "but I ask you to make a choice. If we do nothing, we are no better than those who stand with the Dominion. If we refuse to help those who need us, then we have already lost our way." The room fell into a heavy silence. The galaxy was about to witness something it never expected. The Cairn, the most peaceful species, were about to make a choice that would change everything. The Cairn Council had never been in such a state of division before. The delegates whispered amongst themselves, some in favor of Eldrin Var's bold words, others unwilling to break thousands of years of neutrality. The air was thick with uncertainty. Chancellor Varric Mal sat in silence, his fingers tapping against the polished wood of his chair. He had led the Cairn for over 2 decades, always ensuring their place as diplomats, healers, and scholars. But never warriors, never allies in war. The weight of Eldrin's speech still lingered in his mind. The images of humans fighting not just for themselves but for others. The scene of a human soldier shielding the Cairn child. It was undeniable. The Dominion's cruelty had been ignored for too long. Varric stood up slowly, his gaze moving across the council chamber. "This decision cannot be made lightly," he said. "To align with humanity is to make an enemy of the Dominion. We must not act recklessly." Eldrin took a step forward. "Then how long do we wait, Chancellor? Until the Dominion reaches our doorstep? Until it is too late?" Varric studied him for a long moment before responding. "We must first understand what it truly means to stand with humanity. If we make this choice, we must be prepared for war." The hall fell silent again. War. The word was almost foreign to the Cairn. They had always believed war belonged to the lesser evolved species of the galaxy, those who still clung to violence to settle disputes. But the Dominion was different. It did not seek war for survival. It sought war for dominance. Then, Tivarshen, the young delegate who had voiced his concerns earlier, stood once more. His eyes, once filled with doubt, now held something else. "Resolve. I will go," he said. The chamber turned toward him in surprise. Tyvar swallowed hard before speaking again. "If we are to make a decision, then we must see humanity with our own eyes. We cannot rely on stories and images alone." He turned to Eldrin. "If you truly believe in this cause, come with me. Let us go to the humans and learn the truth for ourselves." Eldrin's lips curled into a small but approving smile. "A wise choice, young one." Varric considered Tivar's words carefully before finally nodding. "Very well. A diplomatic mission will be sent to humanity's forces. You will be its representatives." Miravol, the elder who had supported Eldrin's argument, stepped forward. "I will join them," she said firmly. "If we are to change our ways, we must do so together." With that, the decision was made. The most peaceful species in the galaxy was about to send its first emissaries into a war-torn battlefield. And what they would find there would change them forever. The journey to humanity's war front was tense. Tivarshen, Eldrin Var, and Miravol sat in the diplomatic vessel, their expressions unreadable as the vast darkness of space stretched before them. The Cairn had never needed warships, only envoys and healers. This mission was unlike anything their people had undertaken before. Tyvar stared at the viewscreen as their ship neared Garan 4, a once thriving colony now caught in the brutal grip of the Dominion's invasion. Smoke curled into space from the planet's surface. The battlefield below was a stark contrast to the peaceful cities of the Cairn homeworld. Mira exhaled slowly. So much destruction. Eldrin, the oldest among them, nodded grimly. "This is what happens when the Dominion goes unchecked. This is why we must act." Their ship's communicator crackled, and a deep, rough voice came through. "Unidentified vessel, state your purpose." Tyvar glanced at Eldrin before answering. "This is a diplomatic envoy from the Cairn Council. We seek an audience with the human command. A long pause followed. Then the voice responded. Copy that, Cairn vessel. You are cleared for landing. But be advised, this is an active war zone. No guarantees of safety. The words sent a chill through them. The Cairn were used to guarantees of safety. Their ship descended through thick clouds of smoke, revealing the battered remains of Garan IV's once proud capital. What was left of the city had been fortified. Makeshift barricades, trenches, and human soldiers moving with purpose. Tyvar swallowed hard. These were not the war-hungry savages the Dominion had painted them to be. These were survivors, fighters, protectors. As they stepped onto the war-torn soil, a group of soldiers approached. Leading them was a human in worn-out armor, his face marked with old scars and exhaustion. He studied the Cairn envoys with sharp, calculating eyes. I'm Captain Doran Reeve. You wanted to see what we're fighting for. His voice was rough, but there was no malice in it, just the weight of war. Tyvar hesitated before nodding. Yes, we came to understand. Captain Reeve let out a tired breath. Then follow me. But I promise you this, you won't like what you see. With that, he turned, leading them toward the heart of the battlefield. The deeper they went, the more the Cairn realized. This wasn't just a war. This was survival. The deeper they walked into the war zone, the more the Cairn envoys realized they had entered a nightmare. Smoke hung in the air, carrying the scent of burning metal, and something far worse. The ground was littered with debris, spent ammunition casings, and the broken remains of war machines. Tyvar Shin, Eldrin Var, and Miraval followed Captain Doran Reeve through the trenches. Soldiers moved past them, their faces covered in dirt and sweat, their eyes hollow from exhaustion. Some carried wounded comrades, others worked desperately to repair damaged fortifications. Eldrin spoke first. Your people. They keep fighting, even when the battle seems lost. Reeve glanced at him. We don't have a choice. They arrived at a makeshift command center, a heavily fortified underground bunker where officers and strategists studied holographic maps of the battlefield. The situation looked grim. The Dominion forces were advancing, pressing the last human stronghold on Garan IV. A medic rushed by, pausing only to look at the Cairn with disbelief. Diplomats. Here. Reeve nodded. They want to understand. The medic scoffed. They won't. Then he hurried off to tend to a soldier groaning in pain. Miraval clenched her hands. Is this what it means to be human? To always fight? Reeve turned to her, his expression unreadable. No, we don't fight because we love war. We fight because we refuse to let them take everything from us. Tyvar swallowed hard. But the Dominion is too powerful. Your species cannot win this war. Reeve didn't flinch. Then we'll make them bleed for every step they take. A sudden explosion rocked the ground, shaking dust from the bunker's ceiling. A soldier burst in. Captain, the eastern wall won't hold much longer. Reeve grabbed his rifle. Then we reinforce it. He looked at the Cairn. Stay here if you want, or come see the truth for yourselves. Without hesitation, he ran out into the chaos. For the first time in their history, the Cairn stood at the edge of a battlefield. And they had to decide. You said the eastern wall was falling. Dominion walkers stomped forward, their plasma cannons tearing through what remained of the human defenses. Soldiers screamed orders, dragging wounded comrades back while others fought desperately to hold the line. The Cairn envoys stood frozen at the entrance to the bunker, watching in horror. Eldrin Var had never seen destruction on this scale before. He had read about war, studied battle strategies, even witnessed a few small skirmishes in his time. But this was something else. This was a people fighting not for power or territory, but for survival. Captain Reeve was in the thick of it, moving like a man who had no intention of dying today. He fired at the advancing Dominion forces, his shots precise, controlled. A soldier beside him fell, but Reeve barely hesitated. He dragged the wounded man back, yelling for a medic, before returning to the fight. A Dominion walker aimed at their position, its cannon charging. Miraval's hands trembled. They're going to die. Reeves saw it too. He turned toward his men. Take Kiovir. Then something unexpected happened. A group of human engineers, barely armed, rushed toward the walker. They carried explosives, small, crude devices, but the determination in their eyes made them look like giants. They weren't running to escape. They were running to destroy. The Dominion's plasma cannon fired, but they had already reached its legs. The explosion was deafening. The massive machine collapsed in a fiery heap, and the battlefield erupted with cheers. The Cairn voice stared, stunned. Tyvar Shen whispered, "They aren't just fighting. They're winning." Miraval turned to her fellow diplomats, her voice unsteady. "We have to decide. Now." Eldrin clenched his fists. "If we leave, we are no better than the Dominion." Mira took a deep breath. "Then let's make history." She stepped forward into the battlefield. For the first time in centuries, the most peaceful species in the galaxy made a choice. They chose to fight. You said. The Cairn fleet arrived in orbit, their sleek, silver ships standing in stark contrast to the battered remnants of the human defenses below. For centuries, the Cairn had been known as diplomats, mediators, and scholars, never warriors. But now, their peaceful nature was being tested. Eldrin Var sat in the command center of the Cairn flagship, his fingers digging into the smooth surface of the control panel. On the main screen, the battle raged on. The Dominion forces were pushing forward, and the humans were barely holding the line. Captain Reeves' voice crackled through the comms. "If you're gonna make a choice, Cairn, make it fast. We don't have time for speeches." Eldrin took a deep breath, deployed the ground units. Silence filled the bridge. The Cairn officers turned to stare at him in disbelief. "Sir," one of the commanders asked. "You heard me," Eldrin said, his voice steady. "Deploy the units. We're not leaving them to die." For a moment, no one moved. The Cairn had never sent soldiers into battle before, but Eldrin wasn't asking anymore. The order was given. On the ground, Miraval and Tyvar Shen led the Cairn diplomats, now soldiers, into the chaos of war. They wore lightweight armor, nothing like the heavy exosuits the humans used, and their weapons were meant for self-defense, not war. But they moved with purpose. The Dominion had expected to face tired, wounded humans. They hadn't expected fresh reinforcements, and they definitely hadn't expected the Cairn. The first wave of Cairn fired precision energy shots, targeting key Dominion officers. Their advanced scanners picked out weaknesses in the enemy's formation, and the humans adapted instantly. "Push forward," Captain Reef roared, rallying his troops. The battlefield shifted. The Dominion's steady advance stumbled. Overhead, the Cairn fleet repositioned. Their ships had never been used in war before, but their shielding technology was far superior to the Dominion's. Instead of firing, they moved into position, blocking the Dominion warships from bombarding the battlefield. A desperate transmission came from the Dominion flagship. "Cairn fleet, this is an act of war. Stand down immediately." Eldrin leaned forward, his voice calm but firm. "You call it war. We call it a choice." He cut the transmission. For the first time in history, the most peaceful species in the galaxy stood against an empire. And the tide of battle began to turn. You said. The war between the Dominion and humanity had been raging for years, with no sign of slowing down. The Cairn, the most peaceful species in the galaxy, had remained neutral until now. As the Dominion closed in on Earth's last strongholds, the Cairn Grand Council made a shocking announcement. They would stand with humanity. Eldrin Var, a Cairn diplomat, was sent to the war front. The Dominion expected him to negotiate a surrender. Instead, he delivered a message of defiance. As the Cairn fleet arrived in orbit, the galaxy watched in disbelief. Would a species known for peace truly enter a war that could destroy them? Eldrin knew the Cairn were unprepared for battle. Their ships were not designed for war, and their people had never fought on a battlefield. But the humans were desperate. If the Cairn abandoned them now, the Dominion would wipe them out. Miraval, a Cairn scientist, modified their fleet's shields to block Dominion bombardments. On the ground, Tavarshan led Cairn diplomats, now soldiers, into the fray. The Dominion underestimated them. The Cairn's advanced technology turned the tide, even though they had never used it for violence before. But could a peaceful species truly survive a war? Not all Cairn agreed with this decision. The Grand Council was split. Some believed war would destroy their people. Others feared Dominion retaliation. A high-ranking Cairn official leaked information to the Dominion, offering to sabotage their own fleet in exchange for peace. As Cairn and human forces fought side by side, an explosion rocked the main flagship. The betrayal had begun. Now, Eldrin and his allies had to stop the traitors before the entire fleet was compromised. The Dominion saw the weakness in the Cairn ranks and pushed harder. They sent an ultimatum. If the Cairn surrendered, they would be spared. But if they continued to fight, their homeworld would be next. Eldrin was torn. Billions of innocent Cairn lives were at stake. The Dominion wasn't bluffing. But when he looked at the humans, a species that never surrendered, even when outnumbered, outgunned, and on the edge of extinction, he made his decision. The Cairn would not back down. They would not betray their allies. If war was the price of peace, they would pay it. With the traitors exposed, the Cairn fleet reorganized. For the first time, they took the offensive. Their ships, designed for exploration, became weapons of war. Their advanced shields, meant for protection, were now used to trap Dominion forces. On the ground, Cairn and human soldiers launched a daring counterattack. The Dominion, unprepared for a peaceful species fighting like warriors, faltered. But victory was still far away. The Dominion called in reinforcements, and this time, they weren't taking prisoners. The final battle loomed. The Dominion fleet outnumbered the Cairn and human forces 5-1. If the galaxy believed the Cairn had no place in war, now was the time to prove them wrong. Eldrin broadcasted a message across all channels. We were peaceful. We did not seek war. But when faced with extinction, we made a choice. If we fall today, let the galaxy remember. We stood. The Cairn fleet charged. The final battle shook the stars. Cairn ships fought like never before. Humans led impossible charges, breaking through Dominion ranks. The Dominion, overconfident in their power, never expected the Cairn to fight to the last ship. As the Dominion flagship was destroyed, their forces scattered. For the first time in history, a peaceful species had won a war, and the galaxy would never see them the same way again.